This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 68 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, Amsterdam's canals go electric. Tesla gets ready to unveil the only thing faster than ludicrous, plaid. And I do the math on robotaxies and when they are coming. And that's an exclusive because my math is always exclusive. And speaking of exclusive, we have an exclusive Clean Energy Show report on which EVs can handle long-distance travel and which can't. And the answer will sadden you. Brian, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Not bad. It's been a weird week. It's been hot and cold, and I've been on my e-bike and off my e-bike. And, of course, I've been learning e-bike etiquette. And what I'm finding is that I feel a sense of shame when I'm witnessed not pedaling. So if I pass people on the bike trails, I have to make sure that I'm pedaling. This is especially important if you pass another e-biker because you don't want to show yourself being that fat guy in an e-bike who is not pedaling. So I constantly have to make sure I'm pedaling. After over a year of having my e-bike, I'm still getting used to what I like from it. Now, in the first year, I went all out and always wanted to go the fastest speed. So I had it on level 6, the fastest speed, which is 32 kilometers an hour. So it cuts out only when you get the 32 kilometers per hour. Otherwise, it's assisting you. So, sure. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to feel fast and stronger and more fit, much more fit than I am. However, I cranked it down to about half that and just went at a 19-20 kilometers an hour speed on the trails. And it takes getting used to because you have to sort of, I don't have a great e-bike where it senses the torque or anything. It just, if your pedals are turning, it turns on and it turns off after you reach the speed. So you sort of have to find the sweet spot of the speed you want and keep pedaling. And I don't know. I'm enjoying it. I got to do it a lot more than I have because I hurt my foot. I can't even go for a walk now because I hurt my foot.
What?
My whole body is falling apart, Brian. I've got plantar fasciitis in my left foot. And if I can't go for a walk, I will get even fatter. And if I get even fatter, well, I will die before our next show. Simple as that. And so I have to use the e-bike and make my foot get better. It's because I have arch support, and I screwed up. I didn't use the arch supports for a while. Then I used them, and I went a bit too far in the arch supports. And it's a long story. We don't need to hear about my feet on the show. It's just, things are just getting old and things are falling apart. So the e-bike is particularly important. If I have a chance of living, if I have a chance of seeing fall, it'll be because of my e-bike, Brian. That's all I'm saying. And I've been towing it around with, I got a tow rack on my Leaf. I've got a tow hitch and a bike rack that goes into the tow hitch. I'm tempted to, to haul some dirt or something with that tow hitch, but it's my old Generation 1 Nissan Leaf, has a tow hitch on it by U-Haul. Very happy with it. You just plug it in. It's very sturdy. You can carry 4 bikes, and it just makes it awkward when my son takes it to the high school parking lot and has to, because everybody backs out at the same time, and of course they're all high. High school students these days are all high. They were high in our day, but now they're really high. So, And then I'm finding that the Leaf goes forever in weather where you don't require air conditioning or heat. So that sort of sweet spot that we sometimes get up in Canada here this time of year. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's like we do trip after trip. We went on the highway, we did this, we did that, and it came back, and it's still going. And in the winter, it's like if you make one trip, you got to charge it again. It's such a big difference that the cold makes on my Leaf battery, and when you're not using it.
Yeah, no, and it isn't just the heater that you need, but the air conditioning, which uses probably a similar amount of electricity.
So I just wanted to explain that coming up later in the show, I haven't talked to you about this, Brian. I've done a test with a better route planner, and because we have this one-day trip that we often make where we live, and that is to Calgary, Alberta, from Regina, Saskatchewan. It is the quintessential one-day trip, and it's a place you go to. It takes up the whole day. You kind of don't want to spend any more time that day. I've done really long trips to the States out of necessity because anything interesting in the States is basically 24 hours away, or at least 15 hours away. So I've done that out of necessity. But the one-day trip, which is 750-ish kilometers and 450 miles, so that's what EV can make that trip. How many charging stops are there? How does it compare to my ICE vehicle experience? And there's a few vehicles that I would say match my ICE vehicle experience, because I stop for 2 meals. And even with the kids, as I've said a million times before, we try to make it quick, but it's never quick. Even when we're in a hurry, we're running late. This is a quick one, in and out of McDonald's. Yeah. No, it always takes a half an hour. So if you can count on a half-hour charge at 2 stops, that's really good for me. And that's kind of and I'll throw in a P stop close to Calgary and accept that for 5-minute P as I get older. So 3 stops, 2 half hours and a 5-minute and ish. And that's and most EVs cannot do that. We'll find out which ones can. This will be very interesting, Brian. Now there was a year ago almost that you went to Vancouver. And that was your first long distance EV trip. Let's remind us how that went.
Yeah, it was really pretty amazing. I did 1,100 kilometers on the first day, which is somewhere around 700 or 800 miles. I decided after that I don't really want to drive that far in a day, so I'm not going to do that again. But it all works. Most charging stops, and on the way there I stopped at every single charger, even though I didn't have to. They're about 150 kilometers apart, partly just for the experience of seeing each of the stations, which were all brand new along the Trans-Canada Highway. But it was really perfect. Most charging stops were 20 minutes, which gives you a chance for a bathroom break, grab a sandwich. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I should point out that we are in a very sparse part of Canada, and we just got a charging network from Tesla. You're driving Model 3 Standard Range Plus if you're just new to the podcast. And there's not a lot of cities in between. There's 2 smaller cities, which is where I lunch at. And so it's just a wide open area of Canadian prairie. And so this is probably a good example of sparse charging. But thankfully, we have that charging, and including some non-Tesla charging.
And Tesla has spaced them pretty well. Like it's around 150 kilometers between supercharger stations. So even with a stiff wind or a cold day, that should still work.
Yeah. So I understand that you have a clip for us because you watched something. What did you watch?
Oh, it's PBS Frontline. It has to do with the letter that we have coming up later in the podcast.
So it's time for Brian's Movie Corner then. Brian's Movie Corner.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to mention that I risked my life and went to the cinema.
Oh, my God. Really? And how long has the cinema been open?
Just about a week or so. Like it opened on the Friday and I went on the Monday or Tuesday. So things are starting to open back up here where we are. More importantly than that, new movies are actually starting to be released. So I went to see A Quiet Place 2.
I knew it. I knew that was the one.
The other one that's playing is that Chris Rock is in the new Saw movie.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently he likes the series and he thought, hey, maybe we could throw some comedy. So I'm kind of interested in that one too. But I still only have my first shot for the vaccine, so it is still a bit risky. Mm-hmm. But I was able to buy the tickets ahead of time, and it's reserved seating, so you can go on the website for the cinema and see which seats are taken. And I was basically able to tell that there was, I bought the tickets 30 minutes before the screening, and no tickets had been sold yet. So I figured, okay, well, I'll go to the cinema. There'll be maybe, 1 or 2 other people there. And I was correct. And you buy the seat, and it automatically blocks out the seats around you. That's how they've got their software set up.
Great.
So I picked a seat in the second row, and then it blocked out in front of me and behind me. And I got there, and there was one other group of people. It was 3 people that were together, and so they were about 4 or 5 rows back behind me. Mm-hmm. And so the whole thing felt very, very safe. I even had some popcorn. Ooh. There was those three other people were the only other people I saw at the cinema aside from the employees. But the funny thing was, so I'm sitting down and the previews are playing and they're waiting for the movie to start, and the manager came by. And he walks down the aisle and he's getting closer to me. And it's like, that's weird. What, is he going to kick me out because he thinks I don't have a ticket or something?
We think you have a high temperature, sir. You're sweating.
He thinks this guy, it's like, oh, what's going on here? And he comes up to make sure that I had intentionally chosen that seat because it was in the second row. It was very close.
Right.
And I guess
what kind of a jackass
I must have picked it by accident.
Yeah.
Which I think people do because they get confused on the diagram, which is the front and which is the back.
Oh.
And I assured him, no, I like to sit close. I picked it on purpose. But the third row would have been better. It was a little bit too close.
Oh dear. Well, that is funny and good service. And here's the thing, though, Mr. Stockton. The whole idea of going to see a movie on the big screen, especially with A Quiet Place 2, would be to see it with a packed theater. I mean, that is the hope of John Krasinski, the director and star, that, because this was delayed. It was about to come out when COVID hit, and they were all on the talk shows, and they were all on the talk shows last week again, and it was kind of sad, and it kind of bookmarked the pandemic in a way for me. But they were all hopeful that those screams and everything, and, so you missed that. Didn't you?
No, but I prefer empty cinemas, really.
Me too, Brian. Me too, I'll be honest with you. I don't like people. Especially at movies because they talk and they just can't help themselves, those stupid people.
But also John Krasinski, the director, he recorded a special introduction for the film, which I thought was kind of nice. And it was just a, welcome back to the movies. Thank you for coming to the movies. This is a great experience, and it's great to be back at the movies. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And I always like it when there's something a little special like that. Maybe we can push this to later because we're going to talk about Tesla, but there's a Tesla event coming up tomorrow. So I watched Spaceballs.
What? What does that have to do with it?
I watched Spaceballs because a lot of the nomenclature for Tesla vehicles comes from Spaceballs. So it's ludicrous mode comes from Spaceballs, and then Plaid as the ultimate fast vehicle.
So you've never seen Spaceballs?
No, I saw it when it came out back in 1987. And I thought back then, gee, this is not very good.
Yeah.
And
no, the opening shot made me howl, and then it went downhill.
The only thing that made me laugh was John Hurt is in it, reprising his role from Alien. This is right near the end of the film. He's the guy in Alien that has the thing burst through his chest, and suddenly he shows up playing that character. And I thought that was pretty funny. But I don't know. I'm not sure why that movie has really endured because it's really not that good. It's a weaker Mel Brooks effort. And I had recently seen Young Frankenstein, and that holds up way, way better. Like, that's a really nice production, that film. It's beautifully shot. The production design is amazing. Spaceballs is a lot more slapdash.
It's a movie that would hold up well, Spaceballs, with my hairstylist who has a bad sense of humor. A big sense of humor, but not a good one. And, not a quality sense of humor. And then I've got a couple brother-in-laws who probably laugh at it, too. And I think Elon Musk is in that. And that's why I so feared that he would screw up Saturday Night Live, which he did a very good job on, I think. I still stand by that. Yeah.
But, and I think, we're a bit too old for it. It came out in 87. We were into our adulthood by then. Yeah. And if we'd been 12 when it came out, I think it would have maybe appealed to us more.
Which is about how old Elon was. And I just happened to be... I got a free. We had to add one of the sports channels for my son to watch EuroLeague soccer tournament starting today, and we said, "Is there any specials?" And they said, "You can get Adult Swim for a month free." And I said, "Sure." And I watched a little bit of Rick and Morty, and it was the Snake Jazz episode, which is now a Tesla horn sound.
That's right. Yeah.
In fact. Do I have it on my list of things that I can play here?
Yes, well, maybe let's talk about Amsterdam.
This is pot related.
No, it is not. Have you been to Amsterdam?
No, I have not. I have not left the continent aside from Hawaii, I'm afraid.
I was there once in the 90s, and our car got broken into and our camera was stolen.
Really?
Yeah, I was shooting for a TV show, Utopia Cafe, that you maybe were fired from a couple of times.
Twice, yes. Not many people get fired. Well, it's Hollywood, so yeah, people do get fired twice from things. But in the real world, you only put up with that indignity once.
But anyway, yes, they are testing out autonomous electric boats on the canals in Amsterdam. And it's called the rowboat, which is the word robot with the letter A inserted in there, the rowboat.
Okay.
And yeah, I just thought it was interesting because we talk about, electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles all the time, and it just never occurred to me a use case like this. But, somewhere like the canals, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's probably way easier a type of autonomy than, on the crazy streets.
And there's a job you didn't think would be replaced in 2021. The canal boat driver.
No, and what about those guys in Venice? The guys that push those sticks in those guys are going to be gone.
Gone so long. And what are they going to do? That's the only thing they know how to do, Brian, is push those sticks into the canal.
They'll need to be retrained. That motion can be reworked in some other job, I guess.
Well, you just did the motion and it looked obscene, so I don't know what you're thinking.
Oh, you know what I mean.
Yeah, unless they serenade, unless they sing while they row. I haven't been on there, but well, that's very interesting. Electric and autonomous canal boats, which take supplies and other things, right? They do more than people.
Yeah, it could be for cargo and I think they do other things like move garbage and recycling through the canals as well. So multi possible purposes.
Okay, we got to jump into what do you think?
What do you think?
Brian, it's the hacker group Anonymous has attacked Tesla and Elon Musk in a video that Electric says looks like it could have been made by the oil industry. This is quite a weird and unfortunate thing because my general thought of Anonymous was that they were credible, that they were they might have used some very illicit means, but what they did was legit and well researched. This does not, to me, seem. What do you think?
Well, the strange thing, or maybe expected thing about Anonymous is that they are anonymous, but that also means anybody can be anonymous. We're all anonymous. You could put on one of those masks and make your own anonymous video. So yes, it's a Tesla hit piece that is really.
It came from their legitimate YouTube account. I need to point that out.
No, it's not. It's from a YouTube account which may be legitimate, but it's not the main anonymous account.
Oh, okay.
The Tesla Daily podcast pointed this out. There is a main anonymous account that has like 1.75 million subscribers or something, and that's the main one. This one is much smaller. It gained something like 50,000 subscribers after posting that video.
Of course.
But it's like around 175,000 subscribers. So that's the other strange thing about it too. I don't know, but everyone's anonymous, so who knows what exactly the connections are, if any, between these different channels and different people.
Do you want to tell people some of the things that were alleged in this attack on Tesla and Elon Musk?
Well, it's just weird things like, the only reason Tesla makes a profit is from government subsidies. It's the standard anti-Tesla talking points, pretty much none of which are true.
Okay. Well, let's move on. You can check those articles out on Electric and other places. And good explanation on the Tesla Daily podcast.
And the Amsterdam article came from Clean Technica.
Okay, thank you, Clean Technica. Elon Musk is among the richest people in the world who don't pay much in taxes. Your thoughts on that? Do you have any problem with that?
Well, no, I don't know that much about it, but he doesn't really have a lot of income from what I can tell. He has all of this net worth, but it's all tied up in stock in Tesla or SpaceX. He doesn't take a salary even from Tesla. So, I mean, sure, he should probably be paying some taxes, but apparently he lives day to day, month to month by borrowing money against his shares. He doesn't want to sell any of his shares in SpaceX or Tesla. So he runs his life apparently off of loans. And so it is different technically than getting an income.
Since the SNL backlash in the weeks leading up to his appearance, I've really come to be aware that there's some real hatred for Elon Musk just because he's rich, just because he's a billionaire. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't put him in the same class as Bezos, although Bezos is very much for the environment, and who knows what positive things he will do. I mean, he may there may be a net negative on that, but I mean, he bought 100,000 Rivian electric trucks for the fleet, and there is that. But my son wanted me to ask you how you're feeling about the Kraken. If you're still working on the Seattle Kraken, if you're like doing anything, if you're following anything, the draft or anything, how active are you on that file?
Haven't followed the draft, but I just know that they will start their first season in the fall. So I do plan to pay attention to how they're doing, and maybe even see their fabulous eco arena on a TV broadcast or something.
Yeah, so they have made that eco arena, which we've talked about in a previous podcast. So I feel bad because I feel like if Tesla was funded on taxpayer money, or if Elon was funded on taxpayer money, it would be worth it, because he has done so much to speed up. I mean, every day it becomes more and more apparent how much he has sped up the electrification of transportation. And although the other players seem to be, putting billions, they really have a ways to go. And we're going to talk about that later when we look at how you do a one-day trip in an electric car piece.
No, it's probably the success of Tesla has probably accelerated this transition 10 or 15 years, I would say.
All right. Well, let's get to it then. Robotaxis. I've done some research on robotaxis. I'm fascinated with robotaxis because our thesis here on the show that we subscribe to, I guess, from other people who are smarter than us and are researching this full time, is that robotaxis will be electric, because if you want to compete with someone, you need the cheapest possible way to go. The taxis that are electric can last 2.5 currently, maybe 3 or 4 times as much as a combustion vehicle, as far as longevity and lower maintenance costs. And of course, electricity will be low if you have a robotaxi fleet. So I've discovered on the net that COVID has pushed governments like California to approve autonomous vehicles without safety drivers present because of COVID, because they don't want people, the drivers, to be there. So this is good technology for a pandemic, is to have an automatic taxi without a driver. So in some senses, it's helping the progress of robotaxis. Since 2015, there's been a doubling of miles per disengagement every year. Do you want to explain to people why that's important?
Currently, when you're testing these vehicles, you have a human driver, and they can take over if the car gets confused, if something doesn't work. So as the technology improves, there's just fewer of these driver interventions or disengagements of the automated system. And, we have to get to a point where it's like, the car can drive 1 million miles without needing human intervention, and that's the holy grail when all this is, going to work.
So it's a measurement of how well things are doing. So they basically right now they're going 30,000 miles per disengagement. This is not Tesla. Let's not get this confused with Tesla. This is the companies that are testing, like Waymo and Cruise. Waymo and Cruise are the two main ones. Is Uber still in the game after their accident, or are they just low-key now?
I think they sold out to somebody.
Right now, 30,000 miles per disengagement. But that means that if they didn't do that disengagement, there'd be an accident every 30,000 miles. But, Brian, and I find this fascinating, the average American drives 480,000 miles per crash. So autonomous vehicles are not ready because they would crash more than the average driver right now. However, with that doubling every year, you can extrapolate quite easily because it's been so consistent. Basically, those miles double. So you can, by that standard, in 3 years, autonomous vehicles will be as safe as drivers in America. And that may not be good enough for mass adoption, but it'll probably be good enough to launch services in some cities and get it kicked off, or at least in some neighborhoods, like suburbs where it's easier to drive. And then 1 year after that, it's twice as safe as a human driver. And then 2 years after that, it's 4 times as safe and 8 times as safe as a human driver 7 years from now in 2028. And in the summer of 2028, it's like 10 times. And that's kind of what Elon has touted as, if it's 10 times as safe as a human driver. And maybe Tesla will get there sooner. We really don't know. I suspect they might. How do you feel?
Yeah, their progress really seems exponential. Like they're really, because the massive computer with massive amounts of data is it's reaching a point where they just have so much data that things are moving faster. So, we're still a week or two away from the widespread release of the full self-driving beta, but we've been a week or two away for several months now.
Yeah, and you have purchased full self-driving in Canada for a chunk of money, which I'll stop mentioning because it's scary. Your accountant might get heartburn if he or she is listening. But you would expect this summer then to get full self-driving beta perhaps and be able to test it out, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I would think, it should be by the end of the summer. But of course, Canada is always a bit different than the U.S. None of this beta stuff has been released in Canada, so we're always a bit of an afterthought. But I would think by the end of the summer.
All right. Well, by that standard, it's just the doubling. It is going to happen, and it's just a question of how many X's do we need? How many times better than human drivers? What do you think about that? How many times do you think it'll be before it really takes off?
Yeah, well, you certainly need the data, but the other thing you need is just lots of vehicles. Like you can't have a service that nobody can access. So, there's going to have to be thousands of vehicles in a particular city, or everyone will just get fed up that they can't order one.
Right. It'll just be the early adopters who are, waiting 30 minutes because they want to try it.
No, and there was a story this week from Electrek that Waymo and Cruise have both applied for new permits to be able to start charging for self-driving rides in San Francisco. So this could end up to be, the next major deployment of these.
So I assume that they'll, if it's, let's say they launch it and it's equal to a human driver, somebody dies, gets into an accident, dies, and they say, oh, this is very dangerous. It's just like when there's an electric vehicle fire and they don't realize that gas cars catch on fire. It's just because it's something new, they get scared, right? The actual fires from electric cars are a fraction of what they are in combustion cars, but because they're new, people go screaming to the hills.
No, it's certainly going to be tricky, but you'll be able to share the statistics of, our robotaxis drove this many miles and somebody died. Oh, look at all these normal taxi cabs with human drivers doing the same distance and 10 people died.
Right.
It's going to be hopefully that simple to show the difference.
You're right. I've got a friend who's afraid of flying, and he says it's because he can't control the airplane. And he says, if I drive in a car, I know it's more likely that I'll die in a car, but I can control it. I can try to avoid a crash. I don't like it in somebody else's hands. That lack of control. And believe me, he's a big controlled person. So that's my friend. I won't mention his name. You know who you are, Mr. Hilkowicz. Ah! There, I said it.
Oh, damn it.
So LiDAR is being used by these companies, Cruise and Waymo, and it's very expensive. It used to be $500,000 per car, and then it became tens of thousands of dollars to add LiDAR to these cars. But now it is coming down to just $10,000 per car. And guess who's driving that down? I bet you know the answer to this. Can I give you a trivia quiz? Do you know the answer who's driving down LiDAR?
I do not know.
Apple. Your buddies at Apple.
Ah.
Because they're putting LiDAR on their stinking phones and top-range iPads.
Yeah. So they're, able to miniaturize it and make it cheaper. Well, that's interesting.
Can you explain to me and our avid listeners that why Apple's putting LiDAR in phones? Because it seems expensive.
Extension of what they started to do with having two cameras. So I've got an iPhone 10, and it was the first one that had depth perception, and it really helps for photography because you can make this algorithm that your smartphone camera will end up looking more like a proper full-size sensor camera because it can use the depth data that it gets from the two cameras to blur out the background, but using computational photography. But also, you can measure things with it. Like with the two cameras, you can get a sense of the space in a room, and you can do augmented reality where, you can place objects in the room, on the camera phone.
Yeah.
Or measure things, like my phone has a measuring app, and again, it just uses the 2 cameras. But the newer iPhones also have LiDAR, so it's one more data point that they can use for all of these depth perception things, which are just going to keep increasing, I imagine, in the next few years of, with augmented reality and so forth.
And of course, there's only, dozens of these cars that are getting tested. Once they release the fleet, and these things coat the earth, the technology in them, and even the electric and battery technology, that's going to push that down, which is good for the rest of us who are still buying cars. And yeah, the LiDAR will come down. And Elon and Tesla are just dropping radar, let alone LiDAR. Like, it's just going on cameras and computer recognition or artificial intelligence. So listen, Cruise in 2023, Cruise in 2023 say that they will probably be starting in one city and then spreading city to city, most likely Las Vegas, Phoenix. This is what analysts are saying. And some places like San Francisco or California, that makes sense. Mostly in the suburbs at first, because that is a safer environment, and then it's going to spread from there. By 2030, it will be fairly ubiquitous in big cities, and people will start then to replace their cars with the service. So it's not going to happen on day one. People aren't going to throw away their cars the day this service starts in their city, let alone in some other city. But the idea is that it'll be popular, and it'll be, like you say, if there's enough cars and you can get one in 30 seconds, and you're living in Canada and it's minus 1,000, it'll be warm. It'll pull up to your door. It'll be warm, and it'll wait for you at the dry cleaner or wherever you are. The cannabis shop here in Canada, because we can do that. I just like to say that. Envy us, United States. And I guess half the United States has cannabis. What am I talking about? Somebody should envy us. I don't know who. But any more thoughts on that, Brian?
No, that's good.
Okay. Well, we have some feedback here from Paul, and who sends us an email. He says, this is regarding, by the way, the PBS Nova episode on electrified flight that we discussed last week, which was terrific. And if you can find it, and it's hard, you can. They make it difficult, don't they, to find PBS shows that have already aired.
Yeah, I understand that there is an app that you can get, the PBS app, and you can watch the shows on there. But it sounds like you have to be a subscriber or make a donation to PBS. You got to pay a little bit of money, but these things are available.
I got the app looking for a show once, and I couldn't get the show without paying money, which is PBS seems like the free thing, give it something for everybody for free. So anyway, we were talking about electrified flight on last week's episode, and if you can find that PBS episode of Nova on electrified flight, I thought it was well done and very informative, and very encouraging to see where we're at and where we're going on that. But Paul sent us a letter on that. He says a couple of weeks ago on Frontline on PBS, they had an episode called Plastic Wars. Basically, it said that the oil industry knows that electric cars are coming, and there's nothing they can do about it. So they're doubling down on plastic, and especially pushing hard on single-use plastic. Cheers, Paul. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I pulled a clip from the show that basically summarizes what Paul was talking about.
The world is flooded with plastic garbage.
18 billion pounds of plastic waste end up in the ocean every year.
Equivalent of a garbage truck dumped every minute.
How does this conflict compare to what you saw happen in the 80s and 90s when this sort of last came up with this kind of fervor?
Well, one thing that's different is the actual ecological context is different, that we're really bumping up against ecological limits. Like, we can't delay this for another 10, 20, 30 years, or we're going to be...
So this is it?
This is it. For the oil and gas industry, the stakes are higher too, because single-use plastic is their plan B. They're not going to be able to continue to drill that oil and gas and burn it for energy anymore because the climate can't sustain it. So this is their lifeline. They are going to double down on single-use plastic like we have never seen. So we're heading towards a real battle. This is it. This is the big war.
Yeah, so that's somebody from Greenpeace that was speaking there, and the oil and gas industry is going to double down. Plastics are a huge industry, and it's I don't know. People are finally starting to accept that we have to stop burning all this stuff, but we're a little further behind on the idea of reducing these single-use plastics. So I don't know. It's one of those things that's just remarkable to me, because we've known since the 70s when you and I were kids that there's way too much packaging on everything, and we've not only made no progress in getting rid of it, it's just increased. Like, I was at the grocery store last year, and they had coconuts for sale in the produce department at the grocery store, and the coconuts were wrapped in two layers of plastic, like a spongy layer and then a shrink wrap on top of that. And this is a coconut that has the hardest shell of any produce you could possibly find. And it's been very dispiriting that so little progress has been made on this.
Okay, Brian, what is the general feeling that you have about the hope for reducing those plastics? Do you think that we can get there, or what's it going to take?
Right. Well, there is advancements in, like, here in Canada, we do have regulations now that are supposed to limit single-use plastics, and I think some of those rules have come into place. Some of them, I think, are coming into place later. So, it's a constant back and forth. Governments are trying to regulate in one way, but then there's, lobbying from industry in another way. And it certainly doesn't feel like any real progress has been made yet.
What kind of effect on greenhouse gases does it have? Is it because is it a problem of burying it and having it in the oceans, or is it causing greenhouse gases too? Because that's our biggest priority right now.
Yeah, it's more of a garbage problem, but of course, anything to do with extracting oil is going to have a greenhouse gas kind of effect to it. But really, it's a garbage problem. Garbage has been piling up. Recycling has never, ever really worked. Something like only 10% of plastics have ever been recycled. This is covered in the show. So the industry keeps pushing a recycling agenda, but they've been doing that since the 70s, and it hasn't fixed anything. But as long as they keep pushing recycling as an idea, we can all keep using plastic and think that it's okay, but it's not. It's just an insane amount of waste that is absolutely unsustainable.
All right. Well, thanks, Paul, for talking to us and letting us know. You can get a hold of us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We're on TikTok, Clean Energy Pod. We're on Twitter, Clean Energy Pod. You can DM us, tweet us, retweet us, reply, and speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show for leaving us a voicemail. Brian, we have an epic show this week. It's going to be a record-long show, but it's also going to be a fantastic show because the information we have is amazing. And stop looking at the clock. Yes. You just looked at the clock. I saw you look at the clock over Skype. Okay. Bloomberg's annual EV report came out. This is a busy week. And it's interesting because two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and buses are all well on their way and can probably achieve net zero well before 2050. That's fine and not surprising. And thanks in large part to an early start in China with these segments, and they're spreading to other countries. Trucks and other heavy vehicles are the furthest behind, of course, and urgent action from policymakers is needed to get that on track to meet our climate goals. I think they're waiting for the technology to hit the streets, and then they can start making policy. Passenger cars and light commercial vehicles are on a positive trajectory, but both still need to accelerate sharply because of how long it takes the fleet to turn over. There's some people who think that once electric cars are around, that people just get rid of their gas cars because they're so stupid and crappy and undesirable. I predict that'll be at some point soon. Once people buy their first electric car and their neighbor has one, they're going to be like, I got to get rid of this thing. And the value is going to go down. So almost 60% of global passenger car sales need to be zero emissions by 2030 to stay on track for net zero. Now, thanks to the efficiency, as we know, electric motors are very efficient compared to gas vehicles. Electrifying almost all of road transport, including heavy trucks, would add about 25% of the global electricity demand by 2050. A lot of people, hear this BS all the time in the EV community. People say that, I read that it's going to crash the electrical grid. They can't handle this. And the stupid things the people say, like 3 cars charging on a block will crash the grid. This is the same as like turning on your dryer. I mean, if 3 people turn on the dryer, it's not going to be any different half the time. It's not in an oven, like it's BS, and this stuff gets around.
People are scared of new things.
Yeah, and we're here to reassure you that new things is exciting and fun. So EVs will add more than this in some countries, more than 25%, depending on what kind of grid they have in demand. But a combination of smart charging, network reinforcements, and careful planning will be needed to avoid grid capacity issues in those countries. But for the most part, it's going to be fairly simple between now and 2050. So almost $1 trillion, as far as charging is concerned, is needed for that charging infrastructure and further net zero. That sounds like a lot, but Bloomberg says that we found that overall electric vehicle sales represent $7 trillion market opportunity between today and 2030, and $24 trillion between today and 2040. So with that scale of a prize in mind, they say, it doesn't feel like charging will be a showstopper. So we've got a long way to go, and charging will be worth it because it's such a huge thing, right? Huge opportunity.
And it'll be a slow enough ramp up to electric vehicles that it shouldn't be difficult to build out the grid, build out the charging stations. We've talked about this recently. It's like home heating is kind of the one that I'm sort of more worried about, because we do have to switch all of our home heating to electric, and we know how much that takes. That takes a lot of juice to do that. So, way more power needed in the future.
Yeah, it might be trickier for Canada just to meet heating needs and cold climates, such as Northern Europe. We haven't heard a lot on how that will affect the grid. The outlook for oil demand is grim, Bloomberg is saying, in both scenarios that they have. Even in the economic transition scenario, global oil demand from all of road transport peaks in just 6 years from now. So commercial vehicles are the only segment of road transport where demand is still growing today. And, that's the one that you and I always say is going to be instantly transformed because of economics. Because companies don't act like people. They have a bottom line. If electric vehicles are cheaper, if there's less maintenance, if you can save your company $100,000 for your little fleet, you're going to do it and look like a hero. So I'm not too worried about that. I think that, and then the commercial vehicle segment is growing rapidly now, and we're just getting our pickup trucks coming and semis.
Yeah, it'll just have to do with supply, and everyone's got to ramp up the battery production as quickly as possible.
And just quickly, Brian, I saw yesterday that Walmart Canada has a $600 e-bike with a 10 amp hour battery. Mine is 13 and pretty ample for my ample body to get me around, so it's not insignificant. And the fork has a lockout on it, which cheap forks never have, which is kind of cool, because then you can, if you're riding on pavement, you don't need suspension, and it sort of takes away from some of the energy that you put into the bike. However, they're all sold out. They have a 7-speed transmission, which is enough if it's geared properly, because you don't use. I find I use like 3 different gears with my electric motor, unless I run out of battery, which has never happened. Then I would need all of them. Well, that's not true.
My bike has 7 gears, and now that I own it and have it and ride it, I realize, I don't need that many.
But when I do hit a big hill, I'm a special case because I weigh 1,000 pounds pretty much. When I want to get up that hill, I need a small, little, tiny gear, easy to pedal, to help the bike get up that hill. And the fact that I just take it up hills, too, because I do like the mountain biking experience. There's not enough trails around here. So it's a 36 volt system with 250 watt frame. It is, I don't know. I have seen reviews on these things, and sometimes it's like the seat post clamp doesn't even work. It doesn't keep the seat up. So there's very cheap components on these bikes, and the ones that I bought, you can see the review for my bike on our YouTube channel, and it's the NCM brand, the low-cost brand, which I've upgraded some of the parts on. But it does have disc brakes somehow. Mechanical disc brakes on a $600 bike would not be normal at a bike shop even these days, I think. So that's pretty good that that's there. Unfortunately, the battery is built into the frame, and otherwise you could just buy it and upgrade your old bike, your good bike that you like, and take all the parts off of it. But that's something I'm hoping to do for my wife one day for her bike, because she's got a decent bike that she likes and would like to electrify it in our old age. So Tesla has a big day coming up, Brian.
Yeah, it's unfortunate timing. Their big reveal for the Tesla Model S Plaid is tomorrow, so we could perhaps make predictions about the event, and by the time most people hear this, they can find out what's what. But the big speculation is nobody's really sure which batteries are going to be in the Tesla Model S Plaid. Now, the first thing is that just a few days ago, they officially canceled the Plaid Plus, which was going to be an even higher end version of this car. It would go even faster, have even greater range. It was going to be out 6 months from now. It was pretty certain that was going to be a car with the 4680 battery cells, their new batteries form factor that they announced at Battery Day. But the Plaid Plus is now canceled. The tweet from Musk said that, Plaid is just so good they don't need the Plaid Plus. It is 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, the fastest production car ever in history. So, yeah, that kind of makes sense. In retrospect, the Plaid Plus was probably not ever necessary. But, depending on your reading of the events, it'd be better, it's always nice to have another model, so it's unfortunate about the Plaid Plus. But, we'll find out more at the event tomorrow, but there's still a chance that it has the 4680 battery cell. There are a few people that believe that that's the case because the car is about 300 pounds lighter, and it still has greater range than the previous model.
Interesting.
Or it could just be the initial the 18650 batteries, which the Model S has always used. They get those, I believe, from Japan. And as we all know, they need all hands on deck. They need as many batteries as possible. So if there's a supply of the older 18650 batteries, they're going to use them for something. But, are they going to use them for the Model S? Or have they already made enough 4680s they can put it in there? I'm totally torn. I'm not sure which is going to be the case.
I think it'll be I can't see it. I can't see the new batteries being in there because they're having such... there's been talk from Elon about delays on that. So we will see. Plaid means fast, ludicrous, then Plaid from the Spaceballs movie. And, it'll be... the goal of this car is to impress people, to get attention and to say, hey, look what EVs can do that combustion cars can't. So it's important. And if you're listening to this, you probably... a lot of people wait till the weekend to listen to us, I find. They probably have heard what's gone on already, but my prediction is it'll be the old batteries. And
that's definitely what I thought too. But it's, could they actually remove 300 pounds of weight from the car without it being new batteries?
Well, now I want to get to my feature on the one-day road trip with EVs. This is a Clean Energy Show exclusive. So I've run various vehicles that are available to us in North America. Apologies to you in Europe. Again, Brian and I live on the Canadian prairies, a sparsely populated land and farming community, and they just put a supercharger network in, and they just put Petro-Canada gas station chain has put in, owned by oil sand company Suncor, fast charger stations as well. It's supposedly capable of 350 kilowatt charging, but peak at what, 250 or 200, something like that, 225. Anyway, so my criteria, this is, and a lot of people over the years have come up to me and said, when I can go to Calgary in an EV, that's when I'll buy one. Well, this is the trip. This is people, and most of what we do doesn't require this, but people do buy cars that go on trips, and even if they only do it once a year, once every 5 years, it doesn't matter. They want their car to be able to do this. So this is my criteria. When I go to Calgary, it's divided into thirds because there are cities there about a third of the way in and 2/3 of the way in where we stop. And, it's like 2.5, 2 3/4 hours in, maybe 3 hours. And you have to stretch your legs and you're hungry because it's mealtime. Sometimes we have a light meal, sometimes we have a full meal, and I've had kids for the past couple decades, so we've always had to stop for them and take extra time. So my criteria, Brian, is to have 2 stops for about 30 minutes each, and I will allow, because we're still a little bit behind on EV development, 1 5-minute P stop closer to Calgary. Okay, so we're talking about a trip between Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, and Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
The James one-day trip.
So, here we go. This is what I do in my Prius. My Prius can make it all the way to Calgary, almost, on one tank of gas.
On just the one tank of gas?
However, when I tow to Calgary and my SUV, I'm stopping every hour and 15 minutes at least. And not only am I putting gas in the damn thing, I'm pouring oil into it as well because it's burning the oil from towing. It's not, that's why I really look forward to towing with an EV one day, if I do, in fact, keep up the camping lifestyle, which I don't think I can do. So, 2 stops, 2 meals, and a 4 to 8 minute P stop. So here we go. Model 3 Standard Range Plus. This is what you have. And this is in ideal conditions. This is in the summer, okay? It's not in the middle of winter. These are going to kill that ability because your car is going to use a lot of energy just to heat the cabin, and you're going to have less energy from the battery because the battery is going to be a cold temperature. So for the most part right now with current technology, you do hit it does make it very challenging in the winter. And the bottom line is when there's multiple options of a car available, you probably need the bigger battery. And some cars, even with the bigger battery, don't do it. So here's you. This is 3 charging stops for your Model 3 Standard Range Plus. It is 30 minutes plus 30 minutes at the places that I happen to normally meal in, and a 9-minute stop later on, which is not great, but 30 plus 30 plus 9. And so you go about 420 kilometers, 260 miles in that car. Now, if you upgrade that, Brian, to your Model 3 from Tesla Long Range, you're only making 2 30-minute stops in the cities, and that's it. So that car has a range of 353 miles or 568 kilometers. Now, if we move on to the Audi e-tron, it is a 30-minute stop, a 27-minute stop, and a 4-minute stop. And explain why it's not 2 30-minute stops and they've added that 4-minute. Can you explain to the listeners why a better route planner does things that way?
Not exactly, but it's a algorithm that, I don't know, figures out the optimal route, I guess. They figure out whatever is the least amount of time, I assume.
It does. And different cars, once you get to a certain percentage of charge, slow down. So instead of charging maybe in some cars beyond 70%, they might say just go to 70%, and then you'll end up charging less if you do that and you have another stop. It'll, the total amount of time charging, which is usually, we're talking about an hour here under the best case scenario, which is the same amount of time that I spend stopping. You can't hold your bladder forever, people. You do have to stop and stretch your legs, or you will get a blood clot. There, I said it. The Chinese-made Byte M Byte, which is not available, to my knowledge, in North America yet. The best model was 30 minutes, plus 30 minutes, plus 8 minutes, which I will give barely a pass to. So that the Byte M Byte, which is coming, barely does it. Now, the Cadillac Lyric does very well. It does a 30-minute plus 30-minute stop, and that's it. It has up to a 100 kilowatt-hour battery, which is not efficient, or it would go further, but not efficient like a Tesla or a Hyundai. The Chevy Bolt fails. That is the Chevy Bolt with a B. 5 charges taking an hour and 51 minutes, which is unfortunate because it's a very affordable car, Brian.
Yeah, but it's always had a slow charging rate. Perhaps the new one that's coming out is a bit faster.
That's the new one, Brian.
Sure.
That's the new one.
Not,
and people were disappointed that it still charges at like 50 kilowatts.
No, that's still, I would call that a city car or, very short road trip kind of car.
You can do it, but you don't want a hassle. You don't want this kind of hassle. Not now. Maybe 10 years ago when you're buying your first EV and you're, breaking ground. The Ford F-150 pickup truck, which is coming and just announced, the low range almost passes my test. 2 extra charges for 20 minutes more. But you know what? I thought maybe it's worth it because you're spending so much gas in a truck to go that trip without towing or payload that it might be worth that extra stop. That's my own feeling on that. Okay, the F-150 extended range is, that's the higher priced Ford F-150, will be 3 charges, 30 minutes plus 30 minutes plus 8 minutes. That barely passes my test, but again, pickup truck, probably worth it. But if you want your truck for your EV for trips, you got to get that big battery, and the batteries are very expensive. Now, the Cybertruck, not out yet, not finalized on the specs. The rear-wheel drive will be the same as the F-150 extended version. That's the base version of the Cybertruck, will be the same charging times as the extended version of the F-150. So the Cybertruck Tri-Motor, the one I reserved and have no chance of being able to pay for, is 30 minutes plus 30 minutes, which is good. And good that I ordered that truck, because that would be excellent. Now, if I towed my camper to the Rocky Mountains, Banff National Park or something, I would have to make 3 times those stops at least. But it would probably be worth it, because it'd be such a joy to tow with that, and it costs so much money that I could add an extra hour and 90 minutes to my trip easily, and just to save the, $100 or something. Like, time is money, and it would be significant savings, Brian. Okay, so the Mustang Mach-E from Ford, the standard range fails. There's 5 charges at 134 minutes. However, the extended range of the Mach-E is 30 minutes plus 30 minutes and a 6-minute P-break. So that just passes. That's good. The GMC Hummer is weird, because they have the short charge early on. So you drive for an hour to Moose Jaw, and the closest city to us, you charge for 3 minutes, and then 30 minutes and 31 minutes. So it's kind of weird, but if you have a delicate bladder, maybe it'll make sense to you. Hyundai, the Kona fails 4 charges and taking 118 minutes, which is not too long in time, but it does take 4 charges, and so it's, by my criteria, it fails. But it might pass for some people, at least right now, as we are still a little bit early on in the EV rollout of cars. The Ioniq 5 passes with 3 charges, 30 minutes plus 30 minutes plus 4 minutes, so that's good. That's the SUV that's coming out with the reclining bucket seats. That's has a built-in recliner to the front seat. It's the one thing that I remember from the car, from the SUV. Other than that, it looks great, and people are fairly excited about that.
And the ability to charge from car to car.
Somebody runs out of charge on the side of the highway, you can help them out, which is bloody amazing. The Jaguar I-Pace fails. 5 charges for over an hour and a half. Sorry, Jaguar, but you fail. Kia, the EV6 that has been announced, the rear-wheel standard range fails. 4 stops. EV6 long range passes, 30 plus 30 minutes. That's good. The e-Niro fails for all models. The e-Soul fails for all models. The best it could do is an hour and 41 minutes charging over 4 stops. The Toyota Lexus they sell in Europe is a whopping 7 stops. Fail, Toyota. This is why I don't think they're taking it seriously. They have the technology. They're being jerks about it. I'm sorry, Toyota. But we're hopeful. I'm always hopeful. Polestar long range barely passes, 30 plus 6 minutes. That's not bad. Also not available yet, right, Brian?
No, I don't think so.
The Porsche, which is my car of choice, I think it's really a sexy car. 30 minutes plus 30 minutes plus 6 minutes. So, yeah, the best Taycan. That's the best Taycan. They have many different variants. That's the best one. So you have to buy the best one. And the best one is really expensive, because the cheap one's really expensive. Rivian, the best model of their pickup truck, is 30 plus 30, so 2 stops for an hour. Very good. Now, the Volkswagen that I fantasize about buying, because it's cheap, well, of course, it doesn't work. Yeah, so the more closer to the affordability one would be the ID4 with the 54 kilowatt hour battery. It's a disaster. 6 charging stops, taking up 2.5 amount of time that other cars have been taking up. 2 hours and 35 minutes, and then you throw on a stretch that has to be 100 kilometers an hour to make it from A to B under perfect conditions. So no, if I buy the ID4 low variant, then it's a city car, and that's that. If I buy the higher 77 kilowatt variant, which is thousands more expensive, then we get into a 30-minute stop plus a 30-minute stop plus a 6-minute stop, which is not the best, but it passes. And the Volvo, finally, the Volvo XC40, we have a pass on that, a barely pass, 30 minutes plus 30 minutes plus 7 minutes for P-stop. Any surprises there, Brian?
Yeah, I think a lot of surprises, because I think in general, like a lot of the cars that you're mentioning kind of have a similar range, like around 400 kilometers, 300 miles, 320 miles. And so yeah, I think you look at those and you think, oh, well, the ID4, the Kona, yeah, the Model 3 standard range, these are all around 400 kilometers. So I think the assumption is they would all perform similarly on a road trip. But you have proven that that's not the case, because it's charging speed and the availability of chargers is a huge part of this equation, especially in the near term, when there isn't chargers everywhere.
There seems to be enough chargers. It's the charging speed that is brutal for the most part. I mean, there's some things that would be slightly improved if we had more chargers, I think.
I guess what I'm thinking is, it's like, okay, say you did go with the ID4, which is obviously not a great choice for road trips. Well, at least in the future, if you got into trouble, there would be a charger every, 50 kilometers, if you needed it.
Right. Yeah, and that's important too. Well, I'm going to put these notes that I've made. They are crude. I apologize for that, but they will be on our show notes of our podcast. So if you're listening to our podcast, go into the show notes, and if you want to have a look at that. And of course, aboutaroteplanner.com is a free to use. You don't even have to sign up to trial it, and you can type in your location and another location for what trip that you think is important for you, and see what different cars make that trip.
Yeah, and I want to give another plug for the other app that I always use when I'm doing highway trips, which is Windy. Windy.com, or the Windy app, and it tells you what the wind is like. And around here, the wind is insane. And it's kind of in the summer, it's the main thing you have to check for if you're going on a road trip and plan for way more energy use. But it's weird, though. Windy is also, it's a free app. But lately, there's an ad pop up every time they want you to go for premium Windy. And it says something like, for 5 times more accurate wind forecasts or something. I don't know how they measure that, but
that's
anyway.
Disappointing.
So far, I'm just using the free version.
It's also amazing that as an early EV adopter, you have to basically do what a sailor does and check the weather forecasts. But these EV conditions are perfect, right? These are perfect conditions. These are summer conditions, and they're not including a deadly headwind. So in a way, that's going to make things difficult. It really is.
No, and for those cars that are on the worst end of what you found out, again, it's like, well, you could end up in trouble if there's a huge headwind that you didn't expect, and you may end up having to get towed if you miscalculate.
No, that sucks. It really sucks. And a lot of people will say, I mean, even Elon has said we've taken away the larger battery for the Plaid because people only need X number of miles. Well, you need those miles. You need a certain amount of miles, probably more than what's getting offered on most vehicles right now.
No, and I will share again, like my last trip to the cottage, and it's about 215 kilometers. So you think, oh, okay, no problem. My car's got 400 kilometers range. And I've talked about this drive before. The shortest route, there are no chargers along the way, so I charge it to 100%. And we had an insane headwind this last time, 50, 60 kilometer headwind. And normally it takes about 70% of the battery to do the trip. And this time it took 94% of the battery.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah.
It's time for the lightning round.
The Clean Energy Show lightning round.
Okay, so like I just said, the Model S Plaid high-range variant is taken away because Elon said we don't need more than 400 miles of range. 400 is pretty good, but what do you think, Brian?
Obviously, more is always better, but they are battery constrained, so they have to think about, can we use these batteries in a better way to make more vehicles? If they're ever able to come out with their smaller low-cost vehicle, it's going to be a small, efficient vehicle. It's going to need half the batteries of one of those big cars. So, there's many different calculations at play here, a lot of which has to do with just, battery constraints. But we'll see what happens at the announcement tomorrow. We'll see kind of where they are. I'm expecting some type of an update, at least, on where they are with their new batteries.
What time is the announcement, by the way, for anyone listening on day one?
It's evening, I believe. It's an evening event tomorrow.
Okay, some people have been led to speculate because of this that the Tesla Roadster, which is announced as a 620-mile range, which is a sweet 1,000 kilometers, which rings nicely in my ears. I'd love to see a 1,000-kilometer car just to show people that it's possible, for one.
Yeah.
So I'm worried. Some people are worried that they're going to take that down too. Do you think they will?
I'd say it's possible. Yeah. Again, it's battery supply is going to be short. It's they've got many battery factories they're trying to ramp up, and it remains to be seen how quickly they can do it.
Yeah, it was 1,000 kilometers at highway speed too, which is really, really nice. And I think would sell a lot of cars to the rich, not to me. Texas is getting a new 250 megawatt solar farm that is 8 times the size of the ones we're getting here in our silly province of Saskatchewan. Like Texas toast, everything is bigger in Texas, Brian. A constellation of 5,400 offshore wind turbines meets a growing portion of European energy needs. However, the United States has exactly 7. Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, that's I didn't know that.
That's stupid is what it is. 5,400 meeting a large and growing percentage of Europe's energy needs, and they've got 7 here. Some of it is homeowners, snooty, rich homeowners on the coast don't want to look at them, and there's some other needs. But getting on that, Loch Ness in Scotland is getting a 450 megawatt pumped hydro storage project, and there's no word on how the monster feels about that, Brian.
Nice to know.
The Loch Ness Monster, pro or against pumped hydro, we'll find out and report back to you on the Clean Energy Show. Tesla's China domestic numbers for May are up 89% because they hit the Model Y production full speed in China, Gigafactory Shanghai, so ramping up there. So that was big, and it gave a stock a boost, and then the stock went down.
Yeah, there was confusion about demand in China. It sounds like demand is okay, but if you go on the configurator in China, it's actually a 1 to 3 week delivery if you order a Model 3 or a Model Y, whereas in North America, it's like 8 to 12 weeks or something. So it does actually sound like demand is maybe down a bit in China, but if they make cars in China that they can't sell, they can just export them to Europe, so I don't think there'll be any demand issues.
Okay, well, I will say the United States is saying that it will explore offshore wind energy potential in the Gulf of Mexico now, as well as on the East Coast. Tesla stock is sitting at $600 as we record this midday on Wednesday. Some people are saying $1,000. Your thoughts?
I think we're headed there soon. Yeah, there'll be some good news stories coming out soon. So I'm expecting this slump in the stock to go away soon.
Well, Brian, we've gone way over time. This is our longest show in history, but also probably one of our best. So
it's the best.
Thanks for everyone for listening this week. We love to hear from you. We do the show for you, and we love talking about this stuff. So if you have anything to add to the conversation, get a hold of us in any way you care to, and look at the notes for the show to get the information on the EVs that travel one day on my test, Brian.
All right, that sounds great.
We'll see you next week at the Clean Energy Show. Bye for now.
See you next week.